Good evening, guys. Welcome back. We will continue with our Kubernetes session. So today is Kubernetes Day 9 session, and today the date is 21st of your March 2026, and the timing is evening 5:32 p.m. IST. Okay, guys. So let us continue with our Kubernetes session. So today is day 9, and before we get into day 9, let us try to quickly recap what we did on day 8. So day 8, basically, we try to understand about few more examples, right, on the pod creation, right, by because we were trying to create pod resource, right, so with the help of a manifest or a YAML file, and we try to just saw a few examples where we were trying to create the Docker container, the same thing, whatever we are trying to achieve through Docker container, the same we were able to even do or achieve even in your Kubernetes also, right? So that's what we are trying to compare with what we were using or what we were doing earlier with the Docker with now with the Kubernetes, that too with the YAML file actually. That is what I think we had pretty much covered in our last session. And also we covered even the Kubernetes resources also, right? Resources and how we can able to create a YAML file so that you can able to assign some kind of resource for your pod actually, right? And that is a best practice that whenever we try to create a pod, we have to assign some resources, like, so there is upper limit and there is something like a request and limits. That is what you have to assign under the resources. So this is what pretty much we had covered in our last session. Okay, now what we're going to do today, guys, we will try to cover up some few important topic today. Like we will try to start with something known as labels. What are labels, or we call it as a tags actually, and also we will try to get into understanding about the introduction to the pod, what is pod, how pods are getting created, all such things we will be seeing in today's session. This is what we will be covering in today's session. Okay, now what are these labels basically? So guys, labels are basically, I can say that a label is a key value pair that can be, can say, applied to any Kubernetes objects, right? Right now, what we are doing, like, we are trying to learn about what is a pod. Pod is an object actually. Tomorrow, you might see that we will be learning something like a services, we'll be learning about something like a controllers, we will be learning about something like a cron jobs or jobs, we'll be learning something like a storage, networking. For any kind of a other Kubernetes object, we can set up the labels actually. It's not only for the pod, it can be applied to any Kubernetes object, right? So why we basically assign a label? So labels are assigned so that the user can query the objects. It means that suppose I have so many pods which are running in my Kubernetes cluster, and I want to just like query only for few objects which are working, which are there actually, then I can able to query with the help of a labels actually. Labels are nothing but it like a tag actually. We provide a tags or label, which just like a label what we assign it. You remember on the day one, like when we try to understand about the FIPI story, right? And we know that whenever the FIPI, it want to get onboarded to the ship actually, which is not, which is maintained by the cube captain, right? Basically, when he tried to enter into the cube ship, actually, he was assigned a label for it, right? So basically, what happened? Your cube captain, he just pasted a label on top of that, right? So that what happened, he can onboard to the ship. Same thing like that. Whenever any kind of objects are created in Kubernetes, we can even set a label for that Kubernetes objects. Like for example, pod is one of the resource, or it's an object. I can even able to set even a label for that pod also, so that it becomes very easy for me to query. Say for example, if I'm having pods, hundreds of pods you're running in a Kubernetes cluster, assume that out of 100 pods, 10 pods uh, where your Java app is running, your Java application is running, Java app is running. So then guys, I want to query only those pods where my Java app is running. So wherever you are having those 10 pods, right, you can set a label for that actually. Like for example, label, you can set something like app colon Java app something like this, colon v1, something version 1 or R1 release 1, something like that. You can set a label for your Java app. Now, while querying it, you can query so that you can able to query all, you can query the pods where you have set this label for that. So it means that all those 10 pods will be displayed when you're trying to query for this particular label. So it becomes very easy to manage, and also it is very easy for an end user to get to know about like which pods are used for which applications, right? So he will be able to easily understand with the help of these labels. So labels plays a very important role, guys, and always we try to set a labels for any kind of a Kubernetes object which we created actually. Right now, basically what happened, right? Where we basically set up this label. Now, if you go to this manifest file, suppose if I go to any of this manifest file, you know that under the metadata, there is only one field which you are right now using is a name actually. Right now, suppose I want to set a label, you can set a label under this metadata section. Always labels comes under the metadata section, right? So to add labels in manifest file, we always add it under metadata section. Am I clear, sir? So, right. So we will see like how to create a manifest file so that we can have a label. But right now, try to understand how we can able to do through a command line actually. Now, for example, guys, whenever we try to set up or whenever we try to create any kind of a pod actually, like for example, if I try to run something like kubectl run, I'll just say nginx 1 or nginx 1 hyphen fn image is equal to, I will give the nginx as image, and you can even set a port number also. So like for example, if I say hyphen fn port of 80, so when you try to run this command, basically what happened, a pod will get created. Now, so let me do one thing, let me log into my servers. So I'll go to my AWS account and we will see that we are having both this nodes, master node and worker node. Okay, guys, I told you on the last session that I will be changing this instance type to Medium, but I forget to do that. Okay, anyhow, next class I will try to do that. So let me log into the master node. So I'll copy the public IP, open the terminal. Okay. Now get into the download folders and I'll say ss-i my key ubuntu at the rate, give the public IP address of your master node. Yes. Okay, yes. So you logged into the master node. So before you do anything, let me try to do sudo apt update. Okay, that is always better that whenever you try to log into your Ubuntu server, first you run this command sudo apt update, because it is going to update all kind of repositories. New repositories. If there are any new kind of an apt repositories are there, right, from the main repository, it will get updated everything with this sudo apt update, right? I mean, like if you why you are running this, because guys, tomorrow, like in case if you're working on a system, maybe in mid, maybe you want to install some kind of a package which is required for your practice. When you're trying to do something, you might need some kind of a commands or something which is not available in your system. So there, what happened, you try to go and install the package. So while installing the package, if you're not updated with the sudo apt update, right, like your sudo apt install will not work. Hence, what happened, it is always that at least once you try to log into the server freshly, right, when you try to log in for the first time, we always do this sudo apt update. So always make a habit of running this command whenever you try to log in your system for the first time. Right now, so I want to create a Kubernetes pod. So if I say kubectl get pods, so you see that there are no pods which are running in your system or in your cluster. So let me run this command. Let me create this kubectl run nginx. I'll say 1 hyphen fn image is equal to nginx, and also I can give the port number hyphen fn port, and I'll say 80. So you're creating a pod actually. Now when I try to do a kubectl get pods, you could see that your container is running. Am I clear, sir? Your container is running. Now, what happened by default when you try to create a Kubernetes, if you try to create a pod, by default, what happened, your Kubernetes itself will provide a default label for this running pod. And what is the default label? The default label is something like run is equal to and your pod name. So the default name or the default, sorry, not the name, sorry, default label, I'm sorry, default label set assigned to newly created pod is something like run is equal to and the pod name. Here in this case, while creating the pod, you gave the pod name as nginx1. What it will do that it will try to assign like this. So this is the label which will be, this is a default label which will be assigned for this running pod or this newly created pod. So how do you check that? You can even say kubectl describe pod and the pod name like nginx1. That's a pod name. Now, if you go up, you could see here that you could see under the label section, you could see that run is equal to nginx1. Sorry. So this is the default label which will be assigned if you are not providing any kind of a label when you are trying to create a pod. Here, guys, we are not trying to you are not trying to pass any kind of label while creating a pod. Defaultly, this is the pod will this is the default label which will be assigned for that pod actually, right? Run is equal to nginx, right? If you try to run something like like if I try to run the same thing, like for example, one more pod, if I try to run it, if I give something like a 2, so this is the second pod which you're running. So for this also, you know that it is going to assign a label, a default label. So what is that label? You could see that run is equal to nginx2 because whatever you're giving a pod name, that name it will take and it will set as a label actually. Okay. So that's a label which it assigns actually, right? Now, some people ask Rajesh how to generate the dry run. For example, without running anything, I want to just check it out. So guys, you can just say kubectl run. I'll just say nginx -fn image is equal to nginx. Okay, -fn. I can give port also. Here, what happened? You have to mention something like -fn dry run is equal to client. If I try to provide like this, it will not create a pod actually, basically, guys. It will just try to show you the what is a YAML file which is going to generate it actually. So it's a dry run. Oh, sorry, kubectl get pods. Yeah, you could see that it just show you that it is actually dry run which it is creating. Right. Suppose I want to see like while creating it, what exactly the YAML file it is generating it actually. So you can just mention the command like this -o YAML. Means you want to get the output of a YAML file format. You could see that this is what a default YAML file it will get created. Am I clear, sir? Now, when you're trying to do a dry run, you could see that actually it is defaultly assigning something like run:nginx. Now, whenever you want to set a label inside the pod, you want to, under the metadata, you have to set something like a labels. Under that, you need to specify here the key and the value. This is the key and this is a value. Am I clear, sir? Right? So the key should be unique actually. It means that you cannot use the same key. You cannot say that run:nginx, next line run: something like app1. You cannot reuse the same key again. And also in the same in the same line, you cannot have more than one value. Like for example, I cannot have something like this. You cannot have run: what is it? nginx1, nginx comma front end. Like this, you cannot set it because you will have only one key and one value. So this is a key and this is a value. So that's what I said, that your label is a key value pair that can be applied to any Kubernetes object. Am I clear, sir? So now, if you go over here, guys, so what you're trying to understand that when I'm trying to run in a command line, right, and I'm just trying to pass this -fn dry -run is equal to client, it is actually showing me the YAML what it is by default it is generating. And you could see that actually there are some extra fields it is adding by its own actually. You could see that label it has already added, right? under the spec, the container image name, port number, you could see the container port is 80, right? It has added something like a resources. It has added something like a DNS policy cluster first, and as well as restart policy always and status. These are some default fields which has by default it has added. Who has added? Your Kubernetes itself has added. Kubernetes means I can say it's like API server which has added, right? Okay, good. Now this containers are running. If I try to run a kubectl get pods -o wide, you could see that actually that guys, it will show you like where these pods are running. You could see that both these pods, Nginx1 and Nginx2, are running under the same node 1 actually, because there's only one node available in my cluster. There itself it is running, right? But is there any way where I can externally show any kind of a labels which have been assigned? These are default label which is assigned. Like for here, for this run is equal to uh, Nginx1, and for this label run is equal to Nginx2. That is a label which has been assigned by default. But when you're trying to run or when you try to execute this kubectl get pods-o, it is not displaying any kind of a default labels which has been assigned. Am I clear, sir? So I want to set I want to display all the labels. What we do basically, we'll just say get pods -fn show -labels. This is what the option we use it for you to display the labels. Actually, you could see that under the labels, you could see that run is equal to Nginx1 and run is equal to Nginx2. These are the labels which has been displayed because you are using this -fn show labels, or else you can even use -l option also. That will also, I think, it will show labels. Let me check. It is not there, guys. I'm not sure. -fnl was there actually. Yeah, it is not there. So -fn show is a label. That is what one option which is available. Let me check if there are other options. But this is what one I remember, that show -labels will display you the labels. And here you could see that you are actually giving all the pods. You are actually giving all the pods, right? Suppose you say that, Rajesh, I don't want to display, I want to display only for that particular part, then you have to just say kubectl get pod and then say Nginx1 and then say -fn show labels. That's what you have to do it. So here I'm saying pods, but if you're giving a particular pod, actually, particular pod name, only for that itself it will display the output actually, right? So here, if you are saying kubectl get pods, means it will try to display for all the pods which are running in that particular namespace. Okay. So as I said, right, even like why we are having this labels, guys, as I said, like even there are hundreds of pods which are running or hundreds of services which are running in your Kubernetes. So it becomes very important for us to quickly try to query for those pods which are running for that particular label actually. So in that case, we use the kind of a filters for displaying only the pods which a user requires, right? Now, when it comes to the labels, guys, many people come across with some other things also, like, and along with the labels, we come across something like selectors and also something like annotations also. So selectors and annotation is something which I'll be discussing in a later stage, not now, because we have not covered some other topics like services, like our controllers. Those are the important topics which we have to cover before we try to understand about the selectors. But anyhow, I'll give a small short description about what is selector is all about today in today's session. But we will try to continue about this topic later, because when we try to cover about the services and all right, there we will get to know about the real usage of the selectors actually, right? So, and there is something like an annotation also. This also I will try to give from the very high level what is annotations, but we will try to have a deep dive discussion about the annotation in later sessions actually, right? Okay. Am I clear, sir? Okay, good. Okay. Now the question comes like, yeah, all these labels are assigned for the pods, but all these pods are running in some namespace actually, right? In some namespace. So what is this namespace, guys? We will try to discuss about that also later, not now, right? Because that is a separate topic actually. So all the objects which are created, in cluster, in Kubernetes cluster may be assigned to some namespace, right? So some objects are there which are attached to namespace. It means that they need a namespace, and there are many other objects are there which doesn't need the namespace at all, right? So what is this namespace, and why certain resources are part of the namespace? It means that when you try to create those objects or those resources in your Kubernetes cluster, it needs a namespace actually. So what is this namespace and all, guys? We will try to discuss later. But when you're trying to display the labels for the pods, so it'll try to display all those uh, labels for those running pods which are associated with that particular namespace. By default, what happened? Kubernetes has a default namespace. Sorry, the name of the namespace itself is a default actually. So default is a namespace with which what happened that all the pods will be running by default, right? So when I want to display all the labels for the particular pod, right, it will try to query everything from the default namespace itself. Am I clear, sir? One second, guys. Okay, guys. Sorry. Okay. Yeah, Karthik. Yeah. Okay. Karthik, you have some question?
Yeah, Rajesh. Hello.
Good.
Hello.
Yes, sir. Go ahead, sir.
Here are objects in the sense here what?
See, objects is something like resources, man. Here. Like for example, you remember like as I said, like all your API servers, how the API server communicates, right? Because whatever the API servers are running, they all are running what it has, right? It has all the resources actually, and all those resources works via the REST APIs. You remember I discussed all this in some of previous sessions, right? So all these resources or REST APIs are not but objects itself actually, or in short, we can call it as a libraries. Now, whenever I want to create any kind of resources, for example, I want to create a resource like a pod, or I want to create a resource like a namespace, or I want to create a resource by name service, or I want to create something like a controllers, or I want to create a resource like networking or storage. Any resource you want to create, right? You have to call that particular object, right? Who is going to call you? Kubernetes API server, it itself will call it actually. So objects are nothing but libraries in short. Am I clear, sir? So if I say objects are and the resource, right? They are one of the same actually, right? So synonymously, I'll be using this wording like objects or resources, everything, right? Now here, what happened, right? What you try to do here, you try to create a pod actually by executing this command, right? So in the command line, you constructed a command and you created this pod. So this is something like you're using something like command line, or we call it imperative method. Now, when I try to run this, basically what your objective is that you want to create a pod, and you want to create and you have to give the pod name as nginx1. Now, when you're trying to run this container, when you're trying to run this command is a command line, right? What this command line will do, it will try to contact to the API server. Now, API server, what will do that? He understand, okay, user needs he needs a desired state where he want to create a container with this name, and inside this, he want to create a pod, and inside this pod, he want to run this nginx as an image. So what happened that this API server, it is going to call one object or resource, which is nothing but your pod resource actually. So you remember, like when I try to run a command known as a kubectl, try to run a command kubectl API-resources. Do you remember this command? So you could see that it is displaying all these resources actually, right? Here you could see that the pod is one of the resource. So with this pod resource, right? This pod resource only, what happened, right? You were able to create a pod actually. When you try to run this command, basically the API server, it creates a pod with the help of the resource by name pods. You can call it as a resource or you can call it as an objects. Am I clear, sir? Whenever user want to create a namespace, he uses namespace. Whenever user want to create a replica controller, replication control, he uses resource actually. So how we are trying to call that either through the command line, like this command line you call it, or either through the YAML file. Any one of these ways you can call it to create the resource, what is required by the end user, right? You can able to do it. Is it fine, Karthik?
This is
Okay, good. Right now, as I said, guys, labels and there are something like a selectors are there. We will discuss about this selectors label. Okay, right? Am I clear, sir? I'm going to discuss about this later. Actually. Okay, good. Now, what else? Now you say that Rajesh, I want to just add a new label. I want to add a new label. So here you could see that there are two pods are running. kubectl get pods. There are two pods are running, which has some default label. You say that I want to just, I want to just add a new label actually. So how we are going to add a new label? So you have to just say kubectl get not get label po pod or pure pods. Okay, what is a pod name? Nginx1. Okay, I'll give something like env is equal to dev space tire is equal to something front end. See, you are assigning an extra label with this env dev and tire is equal to front end for this nginx pod bus. Am I clear, sir? How to display it? kubectl get pods -fn show -labels. See, now you could see that earlier you had something like run is equal to nginx1. This was the default label which I was saying. Now you see that you are having two more labels. So this is how you do it in a command. Am I clear, sir? Right? Now you say that, okay, Rajesh, env is something like I have set it up, but I don't want this env dev. Instead I want to rename this label from dev to prod. So how to do it? You will just say, if you do it kubectl label po pod and say nginx1, and I'll just use the same thing, env is equal to prod. So already, guys, you have already used this env label. So this key and the value, I've already used it while creating or while assigning a pod. Sorry, while assigning a label. Now what happened, try to do it, what happened, it will not overwrite it because already with this key, already it exists actually. You could see that it will throw an error actually. When you try to execute this, it will say that env already has a value as a dev. If you want to use it, you have to use override. Am I clear, sir? So then what happened that you have to use something like a -fn override. So now you could see that it has been overwritten and a new label is been assigned for this nginx1. Am I clear, sir? Right?
yes.
Now, it's not only like here what happened, already a container is there, which is a running container. You have set a label. But while creating a container itself, or sorry, while creating a pod itself, I want to assign a label. Yeah, you can do that also. You can just execute the command kubectl run, what is it, nginx3, right? That's the name, and -fn image is equal to nginx, right? And then what you have to use that you have to use something like -fn labels, like this. You have to use it, or you can just use -l also. I think it will work. But I remember it is -fn labels is equal to, right, something like app is colon or app is equal to something like Java app or web app, right, comma what is it, env is equal to something like test or qa something. So like this, you can able to set a label when you're trying to create a pod itself, right? When you try to run this kubectl get pod show labels, now you could see that nginx3 has these labels. Now you could make out that, guys, when you're trying to assign a label, or while creating a pod, when you're assigning a label, what are the default label which was there, right? That will not be created. If you're not giving any kind of a label, by default, it takes a default label. But if you're mentioning the labels, then what happened that this will not be created. A default label like run is equal to nginx will not be created. Then what are the label which you are setting, right? Only this label will be available, or this label should be available for the pod. This is a small difference you have to understand. Same thing when you're trying to create a YAML file. I'll be showing it later in some time. While creating YAML file also, you might be creating a labels. Like under the metadata, you might be setting a labels. Then when you're setting a labels, what happened? What are the default label which was supposed to be created, right? That will not get created. Here what happened? You're not giving any kind of a label, but then what happened? It will try to create a default label. Is it fine? So you can use either -FN labels, or else I remember, can you even use -L also if I'm not wrong? What is it actually? Hyphen uh, L, right? Yeah, not equals -L. I will give something like nginx 4 app is equal to web app uh, uh, something. I'll give Java app, and this is something like UAT, something to other. Yeah. Okay. So -L or -FN labels, anything you can use it, guys. Hmm? Okay, good. Now, okay. Now, why we are giving more than one label? If you ask the question like Rajesh, we are having one label, but why we are giving more than one label? So guys, basically more than one label when you try to set to the pod actually, right? You can able to query about that pod using any of these labels actually. Either you can query about this pod like using this env prod, or I want to get all the pods where like it has a label by name env is equal to prod. Like that, I can display that pod, or else you can just say that I can have a combination of only those pods where the labels are env prod and tire is equal to front end like this. So basically what happened here, you are using something like a selections actually, right? So it means that whenever I want to query for any kind of a pod actually, I can query about the pod information using more than one label. That is what we call it as a selectors. So selectors are basically used to query about that pod information or any Kubernetes object information by using more than one label actually, or more than one key value actually, right? So you will get a better control over querying by querying when you are trying to query with more labels actually. That is what we call it as a selectors. Am I clear, sir? Right? Very good. Now, Now you say that, okay, fine, I want to now remove the label actually. For example, here in this case, you know that actually like I want to remove something like tire is equal to front end. This label I want to remove from this nginx form. So how we are going to do it actually? So for that, guys, it is pretty simple. You have to just say kubectl label pod. Okay, and I'll just say the pod name is nginx1, and here you know that the label is tire is equal to front end. What I'll just say, tire. Okay, and tire I'll just say hyphen minus. That's all. So it means that you are trying to remove this label. So when you try to do a get pod so label, you could see that earlier this label was there. Now you could see that you have removed that. So same thing, you can just say env uat. Like for example, if I try to do a nginx 4 and I'll say env minus hyphen. If I do it, you are removing this label actually, right? When I try to do kubectl get pods hyphen show labels, you could see that now you have removed the label. Okay, good. So what it does basically, if I try to do env, it is going to unlabel it actually. It's going to unlabel that label or that key actually. it's going to unlabel that key. It means that it will remove that key. Right? So what it does that kubectl label pod and the pod name, and you'll just say key and say minus. So what it does basically, it will delete the. Am I clear, sir? Okay, good. Now, now, so how do you create the same thing in the manifest file, right? So I'll go back here in the manifest file. So what I'll do, let me create one more a pod with the name something like pod-7.yaml. Okay. And what I will do, guys, let me try to take an example of pod 6 itself. Let me take this itself. Okay. And I'll say I'll go to the pod 7. I'll paste it over here. Okay. What I will do, guys, I will try to I'll try to give, yeah. Let me do thing under your under your metadata, right? Basically here, right? So you can set a label. So how do you set a label? Like basically you can go to the documentation also. You can just say Kubernetes label and selectors. If you try to search for this article, you will get a official website like kubernetes.io where you will get the information about the labels and selectors. This is how you can able to set under the metadata. You can set the labels like this key and the value, key and the value, right? This is what it is, right? Okay. So I would recommend you to go through this document, guys. Refer to this official documentation, right? And here, if you come down here, I think they would have given some examples. Yeah, you could see that under the metadata, there is something like label section there where you can set this labels, right? So now what I'll do that I will go over here and under the labels, under the metadata, I'll just say something like labels. So I'll give 2 spaces. I'll just say app is what is it? I'll just say Nginx something and env as a dev environment, and any other thing like project is something like learning something. This is what 3 labels I have assigned, right? And what about this one, guys? I mean, I can remove this resource limits. I don't want to set it, so let me remove this resource limits. So this is what I'm creating a pod actually with these labels. So if you want to have more than one pod, yeah, you can create it. So I'll just copy it, the whole stuff, come over here. So you could see that you are creating more than one pod in the same file using the same YAML file because you're using this 3 hyphen, right? So whenever you're using, whenever you want to create, like you want to use the same YAML file for creating multiple objects or multiple pods actually, then in that case you have to use 3 hyphens again. So wherever it see the 3 hyphens, so it understands it's a beginning. It means that it's a completely new YAML content. Same thing here. You could see that 3 hyphen starts. What's a 3 YAML content, right? So I have to do small changes over here. It is 1, and here I'll just set 2, and here let the label app be Nginx as it is. I will just say QA, and let this project be as it is, and then like here I will mention as a 3. And here I will just say as a prod. Am I clear, sir? So I'm just creating, sir, this three pods. So what I'll do that I will copy this whole stuff. So I think I've already lost the connection. No, okay, fine, good. So get inside the manifest folder. I'll just say pod-7.yaml, and I'll just try to paste the content. Okay. Now what I'll do, guys, let me first remove all the pods. So kubectl get pods. So already there are some pods are running. So I'll just say kubectl delete pods and specify the pod name nginx1, nginx2, nginx3, and nginx4. So you are deleting all the pods. So if you try to kubectl get pods, you could say no, there are no pods are running. Right now, what I will do that I will try to run the YAML file kubectl apply-f pod-7.yaml. So there are 3 pods which are indicated. So when I try to do kubectl get pods -o wide. So all these 3 pods 1, 2, and 3 are running, and you could see that it is all are created under the same node 1. Right now, if you want to display the labels, I have to say -FN show -labels. You could see, guys, these are the labels which are being assigned for the all the 3 pods. So you could see that the app and the project, these 2 labels are same actually in across all the 3 projects of pods actually. But whereas only one thing which is changing here is an ENV. Right, guys? Right?
Yes. Hello.
Right. Now, so and also as I said, right, they can even able to get with the suppose you say that I want to display only the pods which is having this ENV as a prod. So you can able to display only that particular pod itself. You can able to display it. So how you do that? You'll just say kubectl get POD pods -L means label ENV is equal to prod. See, you can able to display only that particular pod. Same thing with the if I try to do app is equal to nginx, then all 3 pods will display, right? Because this label is common across all these 3 pods, but I want to display only that particular pod where it is having this label env div. Then in that case, you have to mention only that particular label. Am I clear, sir? Okay. Now, guys, why basically we have these labels actually? So as I said, like basically we have these labels to just to query and to understand like which particular pod you want to get it queried when you are trying to do a kubectl get podded, or you want to query and you want to get the information about the particular pod, they can query with the help of the label actually, right? And these labels are heavily used like for most of our requirement. Like for example, in case of a services, I have not come across with something like a services actually, right? Services is one of the important topic in Kubernetes actually. It is something like where, like with the help of a service, what the service can do, that service can able, you remember that I told about the service. It means that like, previous session, I just told something like, suppose you want to communicate between one port or other port. There are 2 ports which are running. Suppose you want to communicate between 2 ports, you can able to communicate with the 2 ports with the help of a service actually. So service in a high level, if you want to know, it acts like a load balancer, right? And always service works, okay, works with the help of something like we call the selectors actually. Right? Selectors, again, we are not coming to that. We will discuss about the selectors later, guys. But what I'm saying that for the selectors, you need to provide certain labels actually, right? For example, here, suppose assume that you are having pods actually like this. You are having a pod. Assume that it's not one pod. There are hundreds of pods are there which are running. Assume that there are some 10 pods are running like this. Suppose like some 10 pods are running like this, which where that those pods are having a same application which is running in it. Okay, and there are the same set of pods are there which are running for some other. Say for example, this is where like your application, our app server is running actually. Consider this all these 10 pods where your app servers are running. Same thing what happened, right? You will have some more. You are having 10 more pods are there like this, where what happened, right? Your database is running actually. So in this all these 10 pods, DB is running actually. So in that case, what happened, right? There is something known as a service actually, which we have not come across. We will come across very soon about the service, right? Now you say that, Rajesh, this service has to communicate to the particular set of pods where the app is running, right? How we can able to tell that, okay, for this service, like whenever any kind of a request comes to the service, whenever the request comes to the service, that service has to forward that request only to these pods actually, only to these pods. How we can make sure that only the service can only able to communicate to these pods? Because there is something like a label concept actually, or there is something like a selectors actually. So here what happened, guys, you have something like a you have something like a label actually. Here what happened, that you will assign a label. That means that you will tell through a selectors, we say, right? So what we say to the service actually, that whichever label where the label is in a blue color, okay, try to forward that request to those pods where the pods holding a blue color as a label, like this. Similarly, you have one more service actually. You have one more service. Okay. So this service, what happened, whenever any kind of a request comes to this service, it has to forward that request to this pods where the DB is running. So how we'll make sure? So what happened, that there is a label will be there. So that label, what happened, guys, that label is something like a green label actually. So what happened, whenever the request comes in to this service, okay, this service will forward those requests to these pods. So only to those pods where the label what it is having is a green label actually. Something like that you have to understand. Right? So in this way, what happened? Labels becomes very, very important actually. So here, label means here what happened, that the services uses something like a selectors actually. It's selector means inter it uses label. It's not only with one label, you can use a multiple labels also, right? So only send to those parts where it is having a green label and a red label. So these parts will have green label and a red label, like that. So we will discuss more about this services in our upcoming sessions, right? Selectors and that annotations and all we'll discuss in uh, later days actually. Am I clear? So now, once labels are applied, we can query using selectors. Selectors we will discuss in some time, guys. Okay. Now, okay. Now, guys, there are two types of selectors are there. Like if you go over here in this documentation, you could see that actually the label selectors actually there are two types are there. One is the equality based selectors and other is the set based selectors actually, right? So there are two types of selectors. Label selectors are there, right? Now, okay, what is it, guys? There are two types of selectors. One is nothing but your equality based actually, right? Equality based selectors, and other one is what? Set based selectors, right? Set based. Okay. Now, what is this equality based selectors? Equality based selectors, majorly, if you go to the equality based selectors, basically here you are having two operations, major operations. One is an equal, not equal to. These are the two major operations we are having, right? So there are two major operations. There are two major operations. What is it? One is an equals and other is a, what is it? And not equals actually, right? So here, right, and when it comes to the set based selectors, here you are having something like some special patterns are there, like in, not in, exist, doesn't exist, like this. This is what the set based selectors are there actually, right? So set based selectors are, there are four major operations. One is nothing but the in, and other is something like a not in, exist, doesn't exist, or does not exist. These are the major operations which are there in the set based. Now, if you ask me like which are the most used selectors which is used always in the real time, it is equality based selector, because whatever we need it, right, basically we try to query it with the help of equals and not equals. That is a major things we always use it actually. Set based selectors, yeah, in sometimes we might use this also, like in, not in, exists and doesn't exist. Where this is used basically, guys, you will come across something like controllers actually. In case of Kubernetes, you have controllers. Like for example, you have a replica set, replication controller, and we have something like deployments. These are the different kind of controllers we are having here. What happened? Most of this time they use the set based selectors actually, right? This uses the set based selectors. But whereas equality based selectors, who is the equality based selectors? Equality based selectors are used majorly by the services actually, majorly by the services. So there are different types of services are there. We will discuss in later. So services uses the equality based set selectors, and controllers basically they use the set based selectors actually, right? So for us guys, whenever we try to learn about these labels, which is the most selected type which we use it, always we use always equality based selectors, because this is sufficient for us to get any kind of information. Suppose you have some other different kind of a query or the pattern you want to go ahead with that, then you use the set based selectors actually. Am I clear, sir? Right? Now you say that, okay, Rajesh, I want to, here in this case, for example, okay. For example, here you say that I want to display only those, if you try to do kubectl get pods, -FN show -labels. You say that, okay, I want to display only the pods which are having a label known as something like a QA and a prod. I want to only display these two actually. Then how will you do it? We'll just say kubectl get pod -l label. Okay, I can use something like env in. I'm using set based actually, and I'll just open the bracket. What is it actually? I'll just say QA comma prod like this. Sorry, I think I have to close the quote. So you could see that only these two parts, right? 3 and 2, only these two are getting displayed. So here, guys, I'm using this set based selectors actually, right? And same thing if I try to do something like env, what is it actually? env not in QA prod. It means that I don't want to display I don't want to display those parts which is having this key and the value as something like env prod and env QA, right? I don't want to display it. Then in that case, what happens? Only this one will get displayed, right? Only the first part. This is what it is getting displayed. So guys, I hope that you're understanding, right? Right? So what are the queries you're using, guys? So we are using something like a kubectl. What are the queries you're using? These are the queries you're using actually. Am I clear, sir? Okay, good. Now, okay, guys. So that's all about the labels. If there is anything else is there, guys, I will discuss about that in later. Okay. Like this much is sufficient for us to know about the labels actually. Now, selectors we just got a glimpse of what is selector is, but later I will discuss more about selectors, because when we come across with something like services, I will be discussing about the selectors over there more, right? And also like we will be using set based and all when it comes to controllers, and controller again is a separate topic. Okay, we'll discuss that about in a later actually. Now, so guys, even as I said earlier, like there is something like an annotations actually. I don't want to go in detail about the annotation, but I just want to give a very high level information about what is this annotation is all about. So annotations and labels, they look like same only, right? annotations, labels and annotations are the way of adding metadata to the Kubernetes object. Means both look like same only. Both looks to be same actually, right? But what is the meaning, or what is the small difference between Kubernetes labels and the annotation is that actually, guys, annotation, labels, it allows to identify or select or operate on the Kubernetes object actually. But whereas an annotations are non-identified metadata. It means that your Kubernetes will not try to query or will not identify with the help of an annotation. Annotations are not meant for doing any kind of a query actually. Okay, because your Kubernetes object, it will not identify that object with help of an annotations. Am I clear, sir? Okay, so annotations, you cannot specify the selectors by using them with this Kubernetes. You cannot use the, what I can say, that you cannot specify the selectors over these annotations actually within this Kubernetes. So it means that whenever you want to query anything, you have to selectors, you have to use only the labels only. Annotations, even though the annotations are there, still you cannot use the annotations. Like for example here, if you ask me, Rajesh, where do you mention the annotations? Annotations also mentioned here under the metadata itself actually. If I want to just give an example, like for example, I'll just write a small example like this. Okay, and let me try to copy this so that I just need a reference actually here. So this is what the metadata, and within the metadata, we know that actually we will be mentioning about the labels, right? Labels actually. So something like app is equal to something like nginx, right? Env is nothing but the Dave like this. This is the labels you're assigning. After that, guys, in the same section under the metadata itself, they will something like annotations would be there actually. Like for example, annotations. I'll just say something like something branch name is something like main branch, something Prometheus .io, like what is it actually, path, something like slash metrics, something like this, and Prometheus .io slash whatever the port number is, something like some port number. This is what the annotations you will be mentioning over here under the metadata section. But as I said, like always, all your Kubernetes, right, it can able to query about that object with help of the labels only, right? Annotations is not meant for it because your Kubernetes object doesn't understand anything about the annotations at all. Annotations are non-identifiable metadata. They are non-identifiable. Labels are identifiable. I can say identifiable. I can say that yeah, identifiable by Kubernetes objects or by say Kubernetes. Annotations are non-identifiable metadata. Identifying metadata. So guys, these annotations are not used for querying anything actually, because your Kubernetes itself will not be able to identify. Then in that case, why we have these annotations there? So basically, guys, annotations are basically, like used for you for having, for having, I can say that, for example, assume that actually that you want to have Prometheus Grafana, where what happened, Prometheus Grafana is an observability tool. So using the Prometheus Grafana observability tool, you have to observe for your particular content. Mean that if your container or the pod, if it is using some resource like CPU resource or memory resources, if you want to get this informations actually, right, from your pod actually, then in that case, what happened, you will integrate the Prometheus Grafana within your Kubernetes actually. So now what happened, your Prometheus Grafana, which is a third party tool, it can able to get the information about the pod with the help of these annotations actually, right? So because these annotations are not used within by your Kubernetes cluster or Kubernetes object, this can be used by some other third-party tool. That's what we add these annotations. Am I clear, sir? That is what the major purpose for using these annotations. So annotations are not used within the Kubernetes object. It is used by some other third-party tool. Am I clear, sir? But whereas a label, yeah, labels can be used because labels are the default which have been assigned to all your Kubernetes resources, whatever you create, because label is the one which you can set it. But annotations is not for your Kubernetes resources. It is only used by some third party tool. Am I clear, sir? Right. So we will try to discuss about this later, guys, annotations, because it's a very important thing which we would be understanding about the annotations. Very important. We will have a separate session on annotation itself later. Okay. Okay, guys, that's all. Okay. Now, how do you set these annotations? Like, for example, I want to set an annotations like uh, for your running pod or for your pod actually, then I'll just use this command kubectl. I'll just say annotate pod, and in my case the pod is nginx 1, and I'll just say like something. I'll just say scrap something. I'll just say scrap is equal to something true. So like this way you are setting an annotation actually, right? So if you go here and if you try to run this command, so let me check kubectl get pods. So you could see that the 3 pods are running, guys. I will try to set for this pod number 1. Okay, so I'll just say kubectl annotate pod, and the pod name is 1, and something like scrap is equal to, what is it? True. So you have added the annotations. Okay. How do you check it? You can just say kubectl describe pod, and the pod name is 1. When you try to describe it, here you could see that you have added that annotations. Could see that annotation you have added. Am I clear, sir? This is how you add it actually, right? You can do the here, or else you can even do here also like this, right? Like here. Something like this, you can add it here like this. Okay. Okay, guys. So guys, that's what about the labels. I think we already covered around 1 hour. That is fine. I think I thought I will cover many other things, but anyhow, what we do tomorrow morning, guys, I will not be available tomorrow morning, early morning. I can able to take the class at 11 o'clock tomorrow morning. So what we'll do, like we will start with the introduction of the pod, right? The next class is next session. We will have introduction to the pod workflow. Covering only this topic only, right? And okay, and tomorrow evening, what we do basically, we will try to cover about something like about the namespaces actually, right? Tomorrow evening, we'll try to have a namespace. So these are the topics which we're going to cover in next session. Okay, guys. Fine, guys. That's all for the day. Okay, thank you all. Let me stop the recording.